I'm Charlotte McLeod with investingnews.com, and here today with me is Andy Schectman, president of Miles Franklin. Thank you so much for being here. Great to have you.
Hey, Charlotte. This is becoming a habit. It's great to see you again.
Yeah.
I think it's 3-4 years in a row we've done it here. Maybe?
Yeah, we're very consistent. So always good to have this beginning of the year check-in with you. And because we're here at VRIC, I'm going to borrow a little from the agenda because I saw you have coming up. It's a panel called Will the BRICS Survive the Trump Presidency? So this is very timely as we speak literally on Inauguration Day. I want to get your thoughts on that topic briefly, if you could.
Yeah, if we go back to the meeting in Russia just recently, because this was their annual meeting. It was in South Africa last year, in Russia this year, next year or this coming year, 2025, it'll be in Brazil. But something happened there that I think will crystallize, and it's emblematic of Trump as well. We'll talk about that in a moment. But let's just call what happened emblematic of the West and the reasons that the BRICS formed to begin with. So they had something called Mbridge. They had a meeting several months earlier in Novigrad where Dilma Rousseff, the former president of Brazil and the head of the New Development Bank, came out and said, we have agreed in principle, the BRICS nations, in a common settlement currency called the unit. It'll be 40% gold-backed. It'll be traded over Project Mbridge. And to hear the head of the BRICS New Development Bank, the former president of Brazil, publicly say, in principle, we've agreed to this gold-backed settlement currency, which is redeemable by nation states on demand, was huge. Project Mbridge is something I've talked about for over a year, maybe two, and it was a development that is about 4 years long that was between China, Hong Kong, Thailand, and the United Arab Emirates. And the technology is primarily Chinese. And it's operational. Saudi Arabia became the 5th full-time participant in it late last year. So now you have all of these countries and Saudi Arabia as a full-time participant on a cross-border payment system that the head of the BRICS New Development Bank said would trade a common settlement currency. It's a big deal. Now, what isn't talked about enough is that there was another player in all of this, and this is the Bank of International Settlements and their innovation hub. And that innovation hub was helping develop and integrate this into the Western system. And it was always kind of telling it was interesting when you would hear at their meeting that the BRICS didn't want to upend the whole system. They just wanted to make it more fair and to rewrite it, like a new Bretton Woods system, if you will, that they had aspirations of integrating with the IMF and the BIS and integration with the UN and all of these things that were surprising to me. And I probably should have paid closer attention to the fact that the BIS is a Western institution, because here's the espionage part of it all. At the 12th hour, after this Mbridge is operational and was in use, China had the first 2 test trades in late 2023 where digital yuan cross-border with the UAE for delivery of gold and oil worked. It was operational. And at the 12th hour, the operating director of the BIS, Augustus Carstens, comes out and he says, we at the BIS have decided that we can't be involved in any project with countries that are being sanctioned by the West, so we're pulling the plug on Mbridge. Now, this is at the 12th hour, basically at their meeting in Russia. It's as if the guy just realized, after 4 years of working with the BRICS nations, that Russia was the R in BRICS. And to do it at that moment will crystallize their resolve. Now, if we look at it with Trump, he's saying 100% tariffs on any of these countries that further their intention of a common currency. Now, he didn't say common settlement currency, but probably that's what he means. But the point of it is simply this. Tariffs are used to protect manufacturing. There's no manufacturing that he's protecting. This is a sanction masquerading as a tariff. It's more of the same thing. Now, I just simply think that if you wanted to really bring everything together, it would be far better to extend an olive branch than to continue down the same stick route with sanctions. Call them tariffs. They're not tariffs. They're sanctions. So I don't think it will change that much. Yes, we may have better relations with these countries, but the fact remains that the 10-year Treasury demand, if you look over the past 25 years, gold has doubled the 10-year Treasury, but the most important characteristic has no counterparty risk. There's no there's no risk of sanctions and of confiscation, and presidencies come and go, and as you can see, the diametrically opposed way perhaps that we will deal with the world between the Biden administration and the Trump administration. So I think these entities think in terms of decades and centuries, whereas we think in terms of days, weeks, and much smaller increments. So no, this will not stop their drive to accumulate gold and to strive to lessen their dependence on the dollar, which right now will be through trading local currencies and settling any excess in things like gold. And they have something called BRICS Clear, BRICS Play, BRICS Pay, and now the bridge. No longer Enbridge, the bridge. And it's continuing.
Yeah, really good to have you explain it, because when I saw the presentation title, I was thinking, no, of course they're going to keep going. But it makes total sense how you laid it out. So part of what, as you've explained, kicked off what the BRICS are doing is this weaponization of the dollar that we saw with the SWIFT system. And I'm wondering, under Trump, does that dollar weaponization continue to such a degree? What do you see coming there?
Well, that's exactly what he's saying. I mean, that's just it. It's weaponizing the dollar through threats. It's not tariffs, it's sanctioning. So yes, I think it does. And that really, to me, is part of the problem. You look at a currency that is, in essence, $200 trillion in debt. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and government military pensions exceed $175 trillion in and of themselves, and they're off balance sheet. So we're $200 trillion in debt. We've weaponized and threatened countries if they don't follow our agenda. And yet we're trying to force people or countries to accept this currency. And that's not right, and that's not how the system ultimately works. So, yeah, I do think it's a problem, and I do think that is the way that the West has operated. You saw what happened as well when you talk about energy, the petrodollar, right? And United Arab Emirates joining BRICS, and Saudi Arabia straddling more or less, when there was the G7 meeting just a few months ago, it coincided with the BRICS meeting in Novigrad, the one, not the last meeting, but the one before the last meeting where Delman came out and said this stuff. The Saudi finance minister went to the BRICS meeting and turned down the invitation to the G7 meeting. Their allegiance seems to be leaning towards the BRICS, but look at the way the West operates. Gaddafi said he wanted to sell oil for euro, and Saddam said he wanted to sell oil for gold, and you saw what happened. They're no longer with us, and this is what the West has done through coercion. What the BRICS represents is safety in numbers, and I do think it's a trend that will continue because of this sanctioning, because of this coercion, and I'm not to, I just think it's a trend that will continue, and I don't think that Trump, for all of the good things he will do, will change course on trying to make sure that the dollar stays the world reserve currency.
And what is your broad economic outlook for the U.S. in 2025? I think we've got, all this optimism right now, but we still have so many people who are feeling the effects of high inflation, and it just feels like there's such a contrast. So what do you see coming?
I think the optimism is warranted on many levels. I mean, we lived in bizarro world, and that's the truth of it. My parents were hippies, right? I was a kind of a jock, but grew up in a house of my older sister and my parents. Lifestyle is something I always respected. I don't care what your lifestyle is, still be my friend. I don't care what you do, who you do it with, or what you put in your body. That's your business. But over the last 4 years, replacing merit and hard work and effort, which I am a product of in every respect of my life, with lifestyle, really got to me, along with the lawlessness and the open borders and the questioning of the things that made the United States special, the immigration system, the electoral system, the judicial system. All of these things were questioned. And he will come in and hopefully change that very quickly. That is where the optimism is, but I think it's irrational to think that there won't be problems monetarily and fiscally. And the house that he's being left is really in disarray. DOGE just came out and said we'll be lucky to get $1 trillion in deductions over the next few years, not 2. The first 2 months of this fiscal year, which were November, December, I believe, or October, November. Anyways, the first 2 months of the fiscal calendar for the government, the Treasury went into debt to a larger degree than any time in the history of this country. And so the spending is accelerating, as is the involvement in the Ukraine, the involvement in Syria. So many of the things that Trump is trying to do are being made difficult for him to achieve them, let alone a house that, we're creating, Charlotte, $100,000 worth of debt per second. 1, 2, 3, 4, keep on going. $1 trillion every 100 days. That fiscal irresponsibility, even if they balance the budget today, the Congressional Budget Office says by 2031, 100% of income tax will go just to pay interest on the debt and mandatory entitlement programs, which are off balance sheet. So how does a country remain the world superpower when everything like military is discretional and you have to borrow it? There is a problem with debt. And if I were completely honest and thinking outside the box, thinking what could happen, I'm not saying it's gonna, but I think, first of all, if you haven't learned over the last 4 years to question everything, you've learned nothing. Everything we were told largely was untrue to one degree or another. You must question everything. What better person to bring in to oversee a reset than President Trump? He's the master of the bankruptcy and reorganization. And in doing an interview with Francis Hunt, he speaks this way that, he told me he thought Trump was selected, not elected, that there are people pulling his strings, and he was brought in specifically to usher in a new digital surveillance state. Now, I'm not saying that this is what I believe, but what I'm saying is that there's a lot under the surface that is being ignored and needs to be addressed, and he's being left a house in great disarray. But I think we should all be optimistic that we get our culture back. And that's part of what Francis was saying, is that a lot of what we saw over the last 4 years was allowed to happen, and that he comes in overwhelmingly with the sense of patriotism to fix all of this stuff and usher in a surveillance state. I said, well, what do you mean by that? He said, you watch, they'll issue a digital ID under the guise of election integrity. He just came out and said, we're going to issue the digital ID. Now, if you look at who's behind the digital ID 2020, it's the Rockefeller Foundation, it's the Gates Foundation, and I forgot, Canva, I think is the name. It's the big vaccine organization. And the technology behind that ties in your passport, your health records, eventually your financial records, and all of your information in one ID. I'm not saying that this is the case, but what I'm just simply saying is I think we all need to be open-minded, because the worst thing that we can do is trust that everything is going to be okay after last 4 years of insanity. These people are still there pulling the strings, and I guess I'll leave the question, because I don't know the answer, and I hope people don't get mad at me for saying it, but the question, and I said this in my presentation, is Trump the Trojan horse, or is he riding on the Trojan horse? And I guess we'll find out. But from a standpoint, I voted for him, and I'm thrilled he's here because I want my culture back. But from a standpoint of what it means in terms of issuing a central bank digital currency, could it be tied to gold and silver like Judy Shelton and Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary? It's his largest holding. So maybe then he is riding on the Trojan horse. Or if he goes the other direction and issues a CBDC the way that the World Economic Forum wants, the United Nations, well, then he is a Trojan horse. Now, the technology behind the CBDC is there. I mean, it was developed at MIT with Lael Brainerd's assistance overseeing it. I don't want to come across as someone who believes in conspiratorial things, but I think you have to have an open mind and wonder, just how does this all play out? Is he really going to push back against the deep state, or could he actually be part of it? We'll find out. I'm hoping it's the former, not the latter.
Yeah, we'll find out. And it's I like that you look at it from both sides. Like, okay, maybe there will be change, but maybe we've got to be on our guard a little bit.
Of course we do. Just because everyone thinks he's going to be the salvation, and to the degree of getting our culture back and the integrity of the system, of the judicial system, the electoral system, the FBI, all of this stuff, yes, God bless him, and I pray for his safety. But in terms of wondering, is there a bigger system in essence that is being brought in? And you get to a point of a digital ID, it's the beginning. I mean, that's what they're doing, that social credit score. That is the ability to do those things. I'm not saying it's going to. I hope it doesn't. And even Scott Bessent says that he doesn't think we need a CBDC. That would be great. Maybe it's a digital currency pegged to gold, like Judy Shelton is advocating to a degree. That's what she'd really like, but I think it's the treasuries is the first place to go. But again, Charlotte, all I'm simply saying is that I think it's important to be optimistic, but cautiously optimistic for sure, as it pertains to a system that is highly over-leveraged, massively undercapitalized, and woefully indebted. So how does that all play out? Well, a guy like Trump would be smart enough to figure out the best way to perhaps reset a system and restructure and reorganize under a sound money system. That would be my hope. That is what I pray for, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah, we'll cross our fingers for that. I want to bring it over to gold and silver because, of course, these circumstances that you're talking about make it important to own gold and silver, which is part of our conversations for years at this point. I wonder what you're seeing among American people in terms of gold and silver demand. Is that coming through to them? Or, yeah, because I'm seeing, just these past couple of days, instead of that, the Trump coin and the Melania coin. So what is going on?
That's just it. Instant gratification is not fast enough. And it's an interesting phenomenon, too. My mentor, Richard Russell, said, you make 7% a year, you're a rock star. And he wrote the Dow Theory newsletters for 60 years. And one of the things that I find really interesting is that gold is up 30% last year. It's beat the S&P 500. Over 25 years, it's averaged 9.9% appreciation. The S&P was 9.6 with dividends reinvested. It's doubled the 10-year Treasury. It's the tortoise, not the hare. It's not sexy enough, and it just slowly plots along. 30% this year, that Richard Russell would say you've outpaced the Rockstar portfolio 4 times. And yet, as Rick Rule will tell you downstairs, that 0.5% of allocation from Joe and Jane Sixpack to the Harvard Endowment Fund. There is so little participation in this country that people haven't noticed it. That they are all chasing the risk-on sexy trade, the NVIDIA, the Bitcoin, the Apple, the XRP, the things that very quickly can make you wealthy, but it ignores so much of the fundamentals of wealth creation and wealth preservation. It's creating a generation of people who think that type of market action is normal. And it's not. It isn't normal. This is not a new thing. I mean, there are manias, there are bubbles, there are ups, there are downs. And while this has been unbelievable to see the type of appreciation, I think it's being ignored by the value that gold brings, the extraordinary value, its extraordinary track record over the past 25 years and last year, and its woeful under allocation. It's interesting. So yeah, the public doesn't get it yet, hardly at all to that degree.
Do you have a sense, and I'm sure we've talked about this before, but do you have a sense of what will flip that switch and get people thinking, all right, maybe I should start taking a look at gold and silver?
Yeah, well, we talk about the law that was put into effect in 2009, the Dodd-Frank reform, where banks are no longer allowed to be bailed out. They have to be bailed in. And there was a lot of talk of that last year in March and April when Silicon Valley and Signature Bank failed. They were bailed out illegally. And there was a House subcommittee hearing inquiry where the senator from Oklahoma questioned Janet Yellen. So you just bailed these banks out. What am I missing? That's illegal. You're right, Senator. She said it is no longer allowed. Depositors are considered unsecured general creditors, i.e. last to be paid. Now, Silicon and Signature, you had Oprah Winfrey money and all the tech startup money. You had billions in uninsured deposits. She says it was an uber majority decision of myself, the President of the United States, the FOMC, which is the Federal Reserve, and the FDIC, and we all decided that these banks needed to be bailed out or it would bring down the system, too systemic. But it won't be at the expense of the taxpayer. I'm like, yeah, right. She said it'll be the FDIC. So they were bailed out. And he says, okay, does that mean if a regional bank fails in Oklahoma, my constituents will be made whole? No, Senator, they won't be. So we'll fast forward. It would require the same uber majority vote, she says. Just, it's infuriating. We fast forward to last October, just a few months ago, and little dinky flyover country, Lindsay, Oklahoma. Bank of Lindsay, Oklahoma fails. It's the first bail-in that this country has seen, and not a word was picked up by the mainstream. Lindsay, Oklahoma, with only $7 million in uninsured deposits. That's it. Not the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions that Oprah and the rest of the tech startups had in Signature and Silicon, but just $7 million. And the FDIC came in, and there was one regional Fox local news channel that had a little write-up on it, and it's on the FDIC website. And it basically said that it happened on a Friday, as it always does. In fact, there was just a bank in Chicago that failed just the other day on Friday. Another one. I haven't read about it, but I did see that on the way here. Anyways, it says the First National Bank of Duncan, Oklahoma, will take over for the Bank of Lindsay, and all of the insured deposits, that's $250,000, will be made available Monday morning. In addition, one half of the uninsured deposits. Now, it says that those are not supposed to be available in the Dodd-Frank Act, but they gave them half, right? 7 million uninsured. They said half of the uninsured deposits will be made available Monday morning as well. The rest will go to pay the liabilities of the bank, and anything left over, they have up to 4 years to pay out in the form of bank stock, not cash, if there is anything left over. But it said earlier in the article that the liabilities were far in excess of their assets. And so that money's gone. So let's just do the exercise. You have $1 million in the Bank of Lindsay, Oklahoma. 250 is insured. That leaves 750. You get half. That's 375. Plus 250, you get 6.25, and the other 375 is gone. Now, this is the law of the land, and people don't understand this. What would it be that would wake people up? You see a big regional bank, a big one, fail and get bailed in, and people will lose their mind because very, very, very well-read people reading the wrong stuff in the United States have no idea that bail-ins were part of the Dodd-Frank reform, and they're up here in Canada too. So bail-ins are the law of the land, meaning if you have over the insured limit, you're out of your mind in one of these banks. But what would it take to wake people up? That's exactly it, because when those two banks failed in 2023, we added 14,000 clients in 45 days. And that was with banks being bailed out. That's 4 years worth of client acquisition. What happens if one gets bailed in and people say, my God, they just lost everything? That's the scariest part of all to me. That's what wakes the public up. Short of something that jars them or some sort of a market collapse, I think they won't look to precious metals because people are motivated more by greed than they are by fear. They will have to, well, let me take that back. People are motivated by fear far more than they are by greed, but fear is not something that is in people's psyche until something happens, and it's about being proactive rather than reactive. The people you talk to for all these years, you're allowing them to think outside the box and be proactive, and at the point of reaction, it's too late. So, that's really my point. People won't get it, and probably until it's too late, unless they've already gotten it. And listening to you is one way that they're getting it.
Well, and you as well, of course. And I think, yeah, certainly that would be the wake-up call. And you back it up by showing what happened for you when previous bank failures were happening. So this has been very educational, as always. We can wrap it up here. Did you have any just final words of advice to leave people with, gold and silver investors right now? The best piece of advice I ever received was from my father, and I'll say this especially for younger people. I started this company in 1989 with my dad. I was 19 years old, and there was no internet, and we started in an office the size of a closet. And he borrowed money from his best friend, whose middle name was Franklin. His middle name is Miles. We come from nothing. We're the American dream. He said to me, "I won't let you make the same mistake I've made as a younger man. The only rule at this company for you and I to build this would be that you'll buy something, gold or silver, every 2 weeks when you get paid, period. I don't care if it's 1 ounce of silver." And honestly, Charlotte, is the best advice I've ever been given in my life. And everyone who works for me, I say the same thing. I've owed the company outright for 2 decades. He won't fire me anymore. He said he'd fire me if I didn't do it. But I've honored my word to him, yes, because that's important to me, to honor my word, but it's learning the laws of compounding for you instead of against you, and realizing that, you might be young, but, if all goes well, pretty quick, you wake up and say, whoa, where'd all the years go? And it's easy to not prioritize your future self. So by paying yourself first and learning the laws of compounding, becoming regimented in paying yourself first, so that down the road, if you could have a discussion with yourself, I'm 54, and if I could talk to my 21-year-old self, I'd be, hey man, put some money away. So you're gonna have 3 kids and they're going to college, and you better do it. Life's expensive. And most people don't think that way. That was the best gift I've ever been given. That's the gift I would tell people to embrace, and that would be
let the laws of compounding work for you instead of against you, and always pay yourself first, because the passage of time is real, and it's never too late or never too early, really, to start prioritizing yourself.
Okay, I think that's a great place to wrap up. And I think people listen to you because I heard somebody at this conference already quote that advice back to me from you. So yeah.
Wow, that's cool. Hey, man, it changed my life. And you wake up one morning, it's like, wow. But it's just like anything. You don't go to the gym hard on January 2nd and 3rd and then be done. You go every day, day by day by day by day, and it's the compounding of time and of effort and of interest or whatever it may be that is should be the eighth wonder of the world. And it's changed my life meaningfully, and I try to impart that upon all the people that work for me and to those few who listen. So that's cool that someone said that.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll let you go for now. Thank you so much. I'm sure I'll see you later this year. We can check in on what's going on. Yeah, thank you very much.
I always look forward to that, Charlotte, anytime. And maybe we'll see you in July in Boca at the Rural Symposium.
I certainly hope so. For now, once again, I'm Charlotte McLeod with investingnews.com, and this is Andy Schectman with Miles Franklin. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. We'd also love to hear your thoughts, so leave us a comment below.